The waiter's hands were shaking when he leaned in close. Too close. His breath smelled like mint and fear. "Ma'am," he whispered, his eyes darting toward the kitchen doors, "be careful. Don't touch your handbag. Call someone you trust. Leave it exactly where it is." My teacup froze halfway to my lips. The elegant dining room of the Gilded Swan suddenly felt smaller, darker, like the walls were closing in. "What?" The word barely made it past my throat. He glanced over his shoulder again, then back at me. "Whatever you do, don't go home alone tonight." His voice cracked. "The police are already on their way." My blood turned to ice. I looked down at my handbag sitting beside my chair. The same brown leather bag I'd carried for 15 years. The one Arthur bought me for my birthday. It looked perfectly ordinary. Innocent. But the way this young man stared at it, you'd think it was about to explode. My heart slammed against my ribs. "I don't understand. What's happening?" But he'd already backed away, disappearing into the sea of white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers like he'd never been there at all. Would you believe your own child capable of destroying you? Tell me in the comments if you'd have seen the signs earlier. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I sat frozen in that velvet chair, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Around me, other diners laughed and clinked glasses, completely unaware that my entire world had just tilted sideways. My daughter and her husband had left 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. Vivian had kissed my cheek and said they had an early morning. Colton had smiled that polished smile of his and thanked me for a lovely evening. And now this. My mind raced backward through the dinner. Vivian's hollow laughter. Colton's eyes constantly measuring me, like I was livestock at an auction. The way they'd both excuse themselves at the same time, disappearing toward the restrooms for what felt like forever. When they returned, Vivian wouldn't meet my eyes. She'd been scrolling through her phone, distracted, impatient. I'd thought she was bored. Now I wondered what she'd really been doing. The restaurant doors burst open. No knock. No warning. Just the sudden flood of red and blue lights splashing across the gold wallpaper like blood in water. 3 police officers walked in. Calm. Professional. Terrifying. They didn't scan the room. They didn't hesitate. They walked straight toward me. Every head in the restaurant turned. Whispers rippled through the tables like wind through wheat fields. I felt 100 eyes burning into my skin. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The lead officer stopped at my table. He was older, maybe 50, with gray at his temples and a voice that didn't rise or fall. "Yes." My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "We need you to step away from your belongings. Please stand up and come with us." My legs wobbled as I rose. The room spun. Someone gasped. A woman at the next table clutched her husband's arm. One officer pulled on latex gloves. The snapping sound echoed in my ears. He bent down and lifted my handbag with both hands, like it weighed 100 pounds. Another officer spread a white cloth on the floor. They set the bag down carefully. Too carefully. The lead officer looked at me. "Ma'am, is this your handbag?" "Yes." My throat felt stuffed with cotton. He unzipped it slowly. The sound was louder than it should have been. Louder than the classical music playing overhead. Louder than my own breathing. His hand disappeared inside. When it came back out, he held a clear plastic bag filled with white powder. The room exploded in gasps and whispers. My knees buckled. He reached in again. This time, he pulled out small foil-wrapped packets. Then another plastic bag. Then a thick stack of $100 bills bound with a rubber band. I'd never seen any of it before in my life. The lead officer's eyes met mine. There was something in them I couldn't read. Pity? Suspicion? I couldn't tell anymore. "Mrs. Whitmore, can you explain why these items are in your possession?" My mouth opened. Nothing came out. The words tangled somewhere between my brain and my tongue. Around me, the restaurant had gone silent. Forks frozen mid-air. Wine glasses untouched. Everyone staring. Everyone judging. I thought about Vivian. My little girl. The baby I'd rocked to sleep every night. The child I'd sacrificed everything for. The daughter I'd sold my home for, worked double shifts for, poured my entire life into. I thought about Colton. His shark smile. His hungry eyes. The way he always asked about my finances, my investments, my insurance policies. And then it hit me like a freight train. They'd done this. My own daughter and her husband had planted drugs in my handbag. They'd set me up. They tried to frame me for a crime I didn't commit. But why? The answer crawled up my spine like ice water. Money. Control. My estate. Everything Arthur and I had built. Everything I'd saved to leave to Vivian when I died. Apparently, they didn't want to wait. The officer was still waiting for an answer. His pen hovered over his notepad. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to beg them to believe me. But before I could say a word, the second officer leaned close to his partner and whispered something I wasn't meant to hear. The lead officer's face changed. He looked at me again, and this time I recognized the expression. Relief. He straightened up and cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore, we need to speak with you privately. Please come with us. As they led me toward a quiet corner of the restaurant, I glanced back at my table. At the pearls Arthur gave me on our 25th anniversary. At the half-finished dessert I'd ordered because Vivian insisted I should treat myself. At the beautiful evening that had rotted from the inside out. And just as my knees buckled under the weight of betrayal, I asked myself one question that burned hotter than shame. Why would my own daughter want me destroyed? 10 years ago, Arthur died in his sleep. Peaceful. Quiet. Just like he'd lived. I woke up that morning and reached for his hand like I'd done for 43 years. But his fingers were cold. Too cold. The kind of cold that doesn't warm up again. The funeral was small. Vivian came, but she left right after the service. Said she had a work emergency. I stood alone at the graveside watching them lower my husband into the ground, and I remember thinking that at least the rain had stopped. At least I had that. Arthur left me comfortable. More than comfortable. The house we'd bought in 1979 had tripled in value. His life insurance policy was generous. His pension still paid out monthly. Between everything, I had more money than a woman my age could spend in 3 lifetimes. So I sold the house. Too many memories. Too many empty rooms. I moved into a cottage on Maple Street, something manageable, something that didn't echo when I walked through it alone. Vivian got the rest. I set up accounts in her name. Paid off her student loans. Bought her and Colton their first house as a wedding gift. I thought that's what good mothers did. Sacrifice. Give. Make sure their children never struggle the way we did. I thought money would buy her happiness. Maybe buy me a little peace too. I was wrong about both. If you're a parent, would you sacrifice everything for your child, even if they betrayed you? Comment below. Vivian was always a difficult child. Not in the loud, tantrum-throwing way. In the silent, cold way that makes you question if you're doing something wrong. When she was 7, I saved for months to buy her a porcelain doll for Christmas. The kind with real hair and a velvet dress. She opened it on Christmas morning, looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, and said, "Sarah has one bigger than this." Sarah was her classmate. The daughter of the town's wealthiest family. I told myself she was just young. That she'd grow out of it. That comparing ourselves to others was part of childhood. But she never grew out of it. In high school, she refused to wear anything that didn't have a designer label. She'd throw perfectly good clothes in the trash if they came from the wrong store. Arthur and I worked overtime to keep up with her demands. We told ourselves we were giving her opportunities we never had. We were actually teaching her that love could be bought. That people existed to serve her needs. That the world owed her something just for existing. By the time she went to college, the distance between us had grown into a canyon. She'd call once a month. Always short. Always distracted. Always ending with, "I have to go, mother." Never "I love you." Never "I miss you." Just the click of the phone going dead. When Arthur died, she cried at the funeral. But the tears looked rehearsed. Like she'd practiced in a mirror. She hugged me, but her arms felt like cardboard. Stiff. Uncomfortable. Obligatory. 2 weeks later, she called asking about the will. About the insurance money. About what I planned to do with the house. I should have seen it then. The hunger. The calculation. The way she measured my life in dollar signs. But I didn't want to see it. Because seeing it would mean admitting that the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, the child I'd given everything for, had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who looked at me and saw nothing but an obstacle between her and a fortune. The cottage on Maple Street became my sanctuary. I planted roses in the front yard, painted the shutters yellow, made friends with my neighbor, an elderly woman named Dorothy who brought me casseroles and asked nothing in return. For the first time in years, I felt almost content. Then Vivian got married. I met Colton 3 months before the wedding. He showed up at my cottage unannounced, Vivian trailing behind him like a shadow. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm. Too firm. The kind that crushes rather than shakes. "I've heard so much about you." He was handsome in that manufactured way. Tall. Broad shoulders. Hair styled with too much gel. Teeth too white. Smile too wide. Everything about him screamed effort. Like he'd studied how to be charming in a textbook. We sat in my living room drinking tea, and the whole time, his eyes wandered. Not obviously. Just quick glances. At the antique clock on the mantel. At the crystal vase on the side table. At the framed photographs of Arthur. He asked questions that sounded polite but felt invasive. Where had I worked? What was Arthur's profession? Had I thought about what I'd do with the house eventually? Vivian sat beside him, nodding along, adding nothing. When they left, I stood at the window watching them walk to their car. Colton said something I couldn't hear, and Vivian laughed. But it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind you give someone when you're trying to keep them happy. Dorothy knocked on my door 10 minutes later with a plate of cookies. "That young man," she said, settling into my armchair, "has the eyes of a snake." I wanted to disagree. I wanted to defend him, defend Vivian's choice. But the words stuck in my throat. Because Dorothy was right. But I never imagined that the little girl I once rocked to sleep would one day plant a snake in my handbag. The wedding was expensive. Too expensive. Vivian wanted everything perfect. The venue. The flowers. The 8-tier cake that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She handed me the invoice like it was my responsibility. Like I owed her this. "Mother, you always said you wanted to give me a beautiful wedding." I didn't remember saying that. But I wrote the check anyway. Colton's family contributed nothing. His father was a contractor who'd gone bankrupt twice. His mother worked part-time at a hair salon. They showed up to the wedding in rented suits and left before dessert. During the reception, I overheard Colton talking to one of his groomsmen by the bar. "She's loaded," he said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "Old husband left her everything. Smart investment, if you ask me." The groomsman laughed. Clinked his glass against Colton's. I pretended I hadn't heard. I smiled. Danced with strangers. Hugged my daughter and wished her happiness. But that night, alone in my cottage, I sat at the kitchen table and cried until my chest hurt. Have you ever ignored your gut feeling about someone and later regretted it? Share your story in the comments. The first year of their marriage, Vivian barely called. When she did, the conversations felt transactional. She'd ask how I was doing, then immediately pivot to money. "Mother, Colton's starting a business. Do you think you could help with the startup costs?" "Mother, we're thinking about buying a bigger house. Could you co-sign the loan?" "Mother, we need a new car. Something reliable. Could you?" I said yes every time. Because that's what mothers do. We give until there's nothing left. But it was never enough. Every gift, every check, every sacrifice disappeared into their lives like water into sand. And the thank yous got shorter. The visits got rarer. The distance grew wider. Colton's business failed within 6 months. The bigger house became a financial burden. The reliable car got repossessed. And somehow, it was always someone else's fault. The economy. The competition. Bad luck. Never their choices. Never their spending. Never the fact that Colton treated money like confetti at a parade. I started noticing other things too. Small things that added up. The way Colton would steer every conversation toward my finances. Asking about my investments. My savings accounts. Whether I'd updated my will lately. The way Vivian would mention casually how exhausting it must be for me to manage everything alone. How nice it would be if someone younger, someone sharper, could help me make decisions. The way they'd exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Quick. Calculating. Conspiratorial. And yet, every time his eyes met mine, I felt like I was being weighed and priced. Like I was livestock at an auction, and Colton was deciding if I was worth the investment. One afternoon, they came over unannounced. Colton walked through my cottage like he owned it, running his hand along the furniture, commenting on every piece. This would sell well, he said, tapping the antique desk Arthur's grandfather had built. Vintage stuff is hot right now. That's not for sale, I said quietly. He smiled. Of course not, Mrs. Whitmore. Just making conversation. But I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was already adding up the value. Already planning how to convince me to part with it. Vivian stood by the window, silent as always. She didn't defend me. Didn't tell her husband to stop. She just stood there, letting it happen. That night, after they left, I called my lawyer. Updated my will. Made sure everything was airtight. Made sure that if anything happened to me, my estate would go to charity unless Vivian could prove she'd earned it through genuine relationship, not manipulation. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. But I knew. Deep in my bones, I knew that the man my daughter married wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. And yet, every time his eyes met mine, I felt as if I were being weighed and priced. I didn't know then, but Colton wasn't just marrying my daughter. He was marrying into a fortune he thought he could steal. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Mother, Vivian said, her voice dripping with sweetness I hadn't heard in years. Colton and I want to take you out. A fancy dinner. Just the three of us. You deserve a night out. What do you say? I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it like it might bite me. Vivian and Colton never invited me anywhere. Holidays, yes, but only because tradition demanded it. And even then, I felt like furniture. Present but unnoticed. This was different. This was intentional. Why? The word came out before I could stop it. Why? She laughed, but it sounded forced. Because you're my mother. Because we love you. Because we haven't spent quality time together in forever. Love. The word sat wrong in her mouth. Like a foreign language she'd learned phonetically but didn't understand. All right, dear, I said slowly. That sounds lovely. Perfect. Friday night. 7 o'clock. The Gilded Swan. The Gilded Swan. The most expensive restaurant in 3 counties. The kind of place where appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery bill. That's very generous, I said. Nothing's too good for you, Mother. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen holding the silent phone, a knot of unease twisting in my stomach. Dorothy's words echoed in my head. Snake eyes. Calculating. Dangerous. But another part of me, the part that still remembered rocking Vivian to sleep, that still kept her baby photos on my mantle, wanted desperately to believe this was real. That maybe, just maybe, my daughter had remembered I existed. That I mattered. So I let myself hope. Just a little. The week crawled by like wounded animal. I spent hours deciding what to wear. My wardrobe had become practical over the years. Comfortable. Forgettable. I pulled out my best wool coat, the charcoal one with the silk lining. I polished my leather shoes until they gleamed. And I took out the pearl earrings Arthur gave me for our 25th anniversary. He'd saved for 6 months to buy them. Handed me the small velvet box over breakfast on a Sunday morning, nervous as a teenager. They're real, he'd said. None of that fake stuff for my girl. I'd cried. Not because of the pearls, but because after 25 years, he still called me his girl. I fastened them in my ears Friday afternoon and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in months, I looked like someone worth noticing. I wanted Vivian to be proud of me. I wanted her to see that her mother could still clean up. Still belonged in a place like the Gilded Swan. I wanted her to remember why she'd loved me once. Dorothy stopped by while I was getting ready. You look beautiful, she said. Then quieter, be careful tonight, Clara. It's just dinner. Nothing with that man is just anything. I kissed her cheek and promised I'd text when I got home. I should have listened to her. The cab dropped me off at 7 sharp. The Gilded Swan looked like something from a movie. Stone facade. Valet parking. A doorman in a burgundy uniform who opened the door like I was royalty. Inside, crystal chandeliers dripped light across white tablecloths. Classical music played softly. Everyone looked expensive. Polished. Like they belonged. I felt like an imposter. The maitre d' led me to a corner table where Vivian and Colton were already waiting. Vivian wore a silk dress the color of champagne. Colton sat in a navy suit so crisp it looked uncomfortable. He stood when he saw me, pulling out my chair with exaggerated politeness. "Mrs. Whitmore, you look stunning." It sounded like something he'd practiced. Vivian kissed my cheek. Her lips barely touched my skin. "Hi, Mother. I'm so glad you came." We ordered wine. Appetizers arrived on plates, so large the food looked lonely. The conversation started safe. Weather. Traffic. The restaurant's decor. Then Vivian steered us toward memory lane. "Remember when I broke my arm falling off the swing? Remember that summer we went to the lake? Remember Dad's terrible jokes?" For a moment, I let myself believe it. Let myself sink into the warmth of nostalgia. Let myself think my daughter actually wanted to spend time with me. But then I noticed the cracks. Vivian's laughter didn't reach her eyes. Colton kept checking his phone under the table. Their smiles looked painted on, like masks that might slip if they weren't careful. And the way they looked at each other. Quick glances. Silent communication. Like they were counting down to something. The main course arrived. Steak for Colton. Salmon for Vivian. Chicken for me. Colton cut his meat with surgical precision, but his eyes kept drifting to my purse. To my coat. To me. Vivian pushed food around her plate, barely eating. Her hand trembled when she reached for her wine glass. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Then, halfway through the meal, they both stood up. "Mother, we have an early morning," Vivian said, pressing my hand. Her palm was cold. Sweaty. "Stay and enjoy dessert. It's on us. Already." I said. "But we really have to go." Colton's smile didn't move. "Enjoy yourself, Mrs. Whitmore. You deserve it." And just like that, they were gone. Disappeared into the night like smoke. I sat alone at the table, confused and hurt. Around me, couples laughed and clinked glasses. Families celebrated birthdays. Everyone belonged except me. The waiter brought dessert. Chocolate cake with gold leaf. Beautiful and lonely. I took one bite, but it tasted like ash. That's when I felt it. A shift in the air. A presence behind me. I turned. The young waiter stood there, hands trembling, face pale. And when he leaned in to whisper his warning, I knew. I knew that the dress I'd ironed so carefully, the pearls I'd worn with such hope, the evening I'd looked forward to with such desperate, foolish optimism. All of it had been a setup. I didn't know that the dress I ironed so neatly would be the outfit I almost wore to jail. The Gilded Swan was the kind of restaurant where you whispered. Where silverware clinked softly against china. Where even laughter felt like it needed permission. I'd imagined this evening 100 times. My daughter and I, reconnecting. Colton, finally warming up to me. A family dinner that felt like family. Instead, I sat alone at a table set for 3, staring at half-eaten plates and feeling like the punchline to a joke I didn't understand. The maitre d' had seated us in the corner, away from the main dining room. More intimate, Colton had said with that shark smile of his. At the time, I'd thought it was thoughtful. Now I wondered if it was strategic. Fewer witnesses. The restaurant glowed with soft gold lighting. Velvet curtains the color of wine hung from floor to ceiling. Everything looked expensive and untouchable, like a museum exhibit you weren't supposed to breathe near. I'd felt out of place the moment I walked in. My wool coat suddenly seemed shabby. My polished shoes looked old-fashioned. Even my pearls felt wrong, like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But for a moment, when Vivian smiled at me across the table, I'd felt like maybe I belonged. Maybe this was real. Maybe she'd finally remembered I was her mother and not just a bank account with a pulse. That moment didn't last long. The conversation had been pleasant enough at first. We talked about the weather, about the restaurant's decor, about nothing that mattered. Then Vivian started asking about my health. Are you taking your blood pressure medication, Mother? How's your heart? Any problems? You're looking tired. Are you sleeping okay? At the time, I thought she cared. Now I realized she was checking my expiration date. Colton had been quieter than usual. He'd spent most of dinner watching me with those calculating eyes, like he was solving a math problem that kept giving him the wrong answer. Twice, he and Vivian had excused themselves. The first time, they said they were going to the restroom. They were gone for 15 minutes. When they came back, Vivian's hands were shaking. The second time, Colton said he needed to make a phone call. Vivian went with him. Another 10 minutes. I'd sat there alone both times, sipping water, pretending not to notice the other diners glancing at me with pity. The old woman abandoned at the fancy restaurant. How sad. When they finally came back the second time, everything shifted. Vivian wouldn't look at me. Colton's smile had hardened into something else. Something that made my skin crawl. They'd ordered dessert for me. Chocolate cake with edible gold. $75, according to the menu I'd peeked at earlier. You have to try it, Mother, Vivian had said. It's supposed to be incredible. But she kept checking her watch. Kept glancing toward the door. Kept twisting her napkin in her lap like she was trying to strangle it. Then they stood up. Suddenly. Urgently. We really have to go, Colton said. Early meeting tomorrow. On a Saturday? I asked. Very important client. He was already putting on his coat. Vivian bent down and kissed my cheek. Her lips barely grazed my skin, cold and quick. Stay as long as you want, Mother. Enjoy your dessert. We already paid the bill. But, love you. The words came out flat. Rehearsed. She squeezed my hand once, and I felt something in her palm. A tremor. Fear? Guilt? Then they were gone. I watched them leave through the restaurant's glass doors. Watched Colton put his hand on the small of Vivian's back. Watched them disappear into the parking lot without looking back. And I sat there alone, with an untouched slice of $75 cake and a hollow feeling in my chest that had nothing to do with hunger. The restaurant felt different now. Colder. The soft classical music sounded ominous. The other diners seemed to be watching me, though when I looked, they were focused on their own tables. I picked up my fork. Put it down. Picked it up again. Something was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. My purse sat beside my chair where it had been all evening. The same brown leather bag I'd carried for 15 years. Arthur had bought it for me at a department store on sale, because we couldn't afford the expensive ones. I'd loved it anyway. Loved it because he'd picked it out. Loved it because every scratch and scuff told a story. Now I stared at it like it was a stranger. I reached for it, then stopped. My hand hovered in mid-air. Why? I didn't know. Instinct, maybe. Or the memory of how Vivian had looked at it during dinner. How Colton's eyes had kept drifting to it. How they'd both made sure to sit on either side of me, close enough to reach it. I pulled my hand back. That's when the waiter appeared. Young. Maybe 25. Dark hair, nervous eyes. His hand shook when he leaned close, closer than any waiter should, close enough that I could smell the mint on his breath and see the fear in his eyes. Ma'am, he whispered, be careful. Don't touch your handbag. My heart stopped. Call someone you trust. Leave it exactly where it is. What? The word barely made it out. He glanced over his shoulder toward the kitchen, then back at me. His face had gone pale. Whatever you do, don't go home alone tonight. I don't understand. The police are already on their way. And then he was gone. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Around me, the restaurant continued its elegant rhythm. Laughter. Conversation. The gentle clink of expensive silverware. But I couldn't hear any of it. All I heard was the blood rushing in my ears and the waiter's words echoing in my head. Police. Already on their way. My purse sat beside me, innocent and deadly. I didn't touch it. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. And then the doors flew open, and red and blue lights filled the golden room. When they walked out, they left behind more than the bill. They left behind the trap. The police didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. They just came through the doors like a flood, and suddenly the soft classical music and polite conversation meant nothing. 3 officers. The lead one was older, gray at the temples, with eyes that had seen too much. The other 2 were younger, hands resting casually near their belts, scanning the room like they expected trouble. Every head in the restaurant turned. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. A woman in a sequin dress actually gasped. The officers walked straight toward me. Not scanning. Not searching. They knew exactly where they were going. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack a rib. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The older officer stopped at my table. His voice was calm. Professional. The kind of calm that made everything worse. "Yes." My voice came out as a whisper. "We need you to step away from your belongings. Please stand up and come with us." My legs shook when I stood. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Every eye in the Gilded Swan was on me. The old woman in the corner. The one the police came for. I could feel their judgment like heat on my skin. One of the younger officers pulled on latex gloves. The snap echoed through the silence. He bent down and lifted my handbag with both hands, like it might explode. "Is this your handbag, ma'am?" the lead officer asked. "Yes." My throat felt like sandpaper. They set it on a white cloth they'd spread on the floor. The older officer knelt beside it. Unzipped it slowly. The sound was deafening. His gloved hand disappeared inside. When it came back out, he held a clear plastic bag. White powder. Lots of it. The restaurant exploded in whispers. My knees buckled. One of the officers caught my elbow. "Ma'am, you need to stay standing." He reached into the bag again. Pulled out small packets wrapped in foil. Then another plastic bag. Then a thick stack of $100 bills bound with a rubber band. I'd never seen any of it in my life. The room spun. Faces blurred together. Someone said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. The lead officer stood up, holding the evidence bag. "Mrs. Whitmore, can you explain why these items are in your possession?" My mouth opened. Nothing came out. My brain had short-circuited. The words tangled somewhere between thought and speech. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them about Vivian and Colton. About how they'd left suddenly. About the waiter's warning. About everything. But all I could do was stand there shaking. Around me, the other diners stared. A man in an expensive suit whispered to his wife. A couple at the next table had their phones out, probably filming. A waiter stood frozen near the kitchen door, tray still balanced on his palm. This was it. My entire life reduced to this moment. Standing in a fancy restaurant while police pulled drugs from my handbag. Every sacrifice, every year of hard work, every memory of Arthur, all of it erased by this single horrible moment. And my daughter had done this to me. The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. Vivian. My little girl. The baby I'd nursed through fevers and nightmares. The child I'd worked double shifts for. The daughter I'd given everything to. She'd planted drugs in my purse and walked away. The lead officer was watching me. Waiting. His pen hovered over his notepad. My voice cracked. I don't know how that got there. I've never seen. One of the younger officers leaned close to the lead officer and whispered something. Too quiet for me to hear. But I saw the lead officer's face change. The suspicion softened. The hard line of his mouth relaxed slightly. He looked at me again, and this time I recognized the expression. Relief. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice different now, gentler, "we need to speak with you privately." "Not here. Can you come with us?" I nodded. Words had abandoned me completely. As they led me toward a private room near the back of the restaurant, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. At my table. At the chocolate cake I'd never touched. At the pearls Arthur had saved 6 months to buy. At the beautiful evening that had rotted from the inside out. And then the doors flew open, and red and blue lights filled the golden room. They took me to a small room behind the kitchen. Storage, maybe, or an office. Boxes stacked in the corner. A metal desk. 2 folding chairs. The smell of cleaning supplies and old coffee. Nothing like the golden elegance of the dining room. This was the real world. Cold. Fluorescent. Honest. The lead officer gestured to a chair. I sat. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Detective Harris. These are Officers Chin and Rodriguez. He pulled out the other chair and sat across from me. I need you to listen very carefully. You're not under arrest. The words took a moment to land. I'm not. No, ma'am. But we need to ask you some questions. Officer Chin closed the door. The click felt final. Detective Harris set the evidence bag on the desk between us. The drugs. The money. All of it wrapped in plastic like a specimen in a lab. Do you know what this is? He asked. No. I've never seen it before tonight. You're sure? I'm 74 years old, detective. I've never touched drugs in my life. I don't even like taking aspirin. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded, like I'd passed some kind of test. We believe you. The relief that flooded through me was so strong it hurt. You do? Yes. And we know who put that in your bag. The room went silent. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of the restaurant. Dishes clattering. Muted conversation. Life continuing while mine hung in the balance. Your daughter and son-in-law, Detective Harris said quietly. Hearing it out loud made it real. Made it undeniable. I'd known, of course. Known since the moment the waiter whispered his warning. But knowing and hearing are different things. Tears burned behind my eyes. I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not here. How did you know? My voice sounded strange. Hollow. The waiter. He called us about 40 minutes ago. Why? How did he? Detective Harris leaned back in his chair. His name is Marcus Chun. He nodded toward the younger officer by the door. My nephew. He's working his way through law school. Officer Chin gave me a small, sad smile. Marcus overheard your daughter and son-in-law talking in the restroom hallway, Detective Harris continued. They didn't know anyone could hear them. But the acoustics in that hallway carry. He heard everything. What did they say? I needed to know. Needed to hear how thoroughly my daughter had betrayed me. Detective Harris pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Marcus recorded it on his phone. Do you want to hear? Did I? Did I want to hear my daughter plotting my destruction in her own words? Yes. He pressed play. Vivian's voice came through tinny and distant but unmistakable. Are you sure this will work? Colton's response was calm. Confident. Absolutely. By the time the cops find it, we'll be long gone. She'll panic, probably try to hide it or throw it away. Either way, it proves she knew it was there. And then we get power of attorney. She's clearly unstable. Can't manage her own affairs. We'll have access to everything. A pause. Then Vivian, quieter now. She's my mother, Colton. She's a bank account with a heartbeat. And that heartbeat's been going way too long. Another pause. Longer this time. I waited for Vivian to object. To defend me. To remember that I was her mother, not an obstacle. Instead she said, let's just get this over with. The recording ended. The silence in the room was suffocating. I sat there, staring at the metal desk, at the evidence bag, at nothing. My daughter's voice echoed in my head. That heartbeat's been going too long. She wanted me gone. Not dead maybe, but gone. Locked away. Declared incompetent. Stripped of my dignity and my freedom. And for what? Money. Control. Greed. Detective Harris gave me a moment. When I finally looked up, his expression was kind. Understanding. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. I know this isn't easy. What happens now? I asked. Now we gather evidence. We've already got the recording. We'll analyze the drugs, trace the money, build a case. But we need your help. Anything. They're going to call you tomorrow. Probably act concerned, ask how you're doing. We need you to play along. Act confused. Scared. Let them think their plan is working. I thought about that. About pretending to be the helpless old woman they saw me as. About giving them enough rope to hang themselves. I can do that, I said. Officer Rodriguez spoke for the first time. You're a lot tougher than they think, aren't you, Mrs. Whitmore? I touched the pearls at my ears. Arthur's gift. His promise. His love. They're about to find out. But as they zipped up the evidence bag, one officer leaned closer and said, Mrs. Whitmore, we already know this wasn't you. Marcus Chun brought me a cup of tea while we waited for the paperwork. His hands were steadier now, the fear from earlier replaced with quiet determination. Thank you, I said. For calling the police. For risking your job. He sat down in the chair Detective Harris had vacated. I couldn't let them do that to you. My grandmother is about your age. If someone tried to hurt her like that, he shook his head. I had to do something. How did you know? That they were setting me up. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I didn't, at first. But I've been working at the Gilded Swan for 2 years. You learn to read people. Your daughter and her husband, they were acting strange all night. Nervous. Kept looking at their watches. And the way they positioned themselves around you, it felt calculated. I should have seen it, I said quietly. A mother should know. They were counting on you not seeing it. Counting on your love making you blind. He was right. That's exactly what they'd counted on. My love. My desperation for connection. My foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, my daughter still cared. When they left for the restroom the second time, Marcus continued, I followed them. Not obviously, just close enough to hear. The hallway near the bathrooms, the walls are thin. I heard Mr. Avery say something about the package and making sure it's deep enough. That's when I knew something was very wrong. So you recorded them? I pulled out my phone and hit record. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped it. But I got it. Every word. He paused. When they came back to the table and then left so suddenly, I knew it was time to call my uncle. Your uncle is Detective Harris? Yes, ma'am. He's been on the force 20 years. Seen every kind of scam, every kind of betrayal. When I told him what I'd heard, he mobilized immediately. Got a warrant. Assembled the team. He said. Marcus stopped, looking uncomfortable. What did he say? Dorothy answered her door in a bathrobe and curlers, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a word. Marcus Chun waited in his car until he saw her front door close. Then the headlights disappeared down the street, leaving Maple Street quiet and dark. Dorothy made me tea, the real kind, not the bags. She sat me down at her kitchen table and waited. She didn't push. Didn't ask questions. Just waited until I was ready to talk. So I told her everything. The dinner. The waiter. The police. The recording of my daughter plotting my destruction like it was a business transaction. When I finished, Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Clara. I should have listened to you. About Colton. About all of it. Love makes us stupid, she said. Especially mother love. It's the kind that forgives too much and sees too little. We sat in silence for a while. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a car drove past slowly, and I tensed until I saw the police emblem on the door. The patrol detective Harris had promised. What are you going to do? Dorothy asked finally. What the detective asked. Play along. Let them think they've won. And then I make sure they lose everything. Dorothy smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd lived long enough to know that sometimes justice requires teeth. Good, she said. I spent the night in Dorothy's guest room, lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Vivian's voice. That heartbeat's been going too long. At 7 a.m, my phone rang. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Detective Harris had told me to sound groggy, confused, like I'd been crying. It wasn't hard. I had been crying. Hello? My voice cracked perfectly. Mother? Oh, thank God. Vivian's voice dripped with false concern. I've been so worried. Are you okay? Did you get home safely last night? Ah, yes. I'm at Dorothy's. Why are you at Dorothy's? Suspicion crept into her tone. What happened? The police, I whispered. They came to the restaurant. After you left. They found, I let my voice break. They found things in my purse. Terrible things. I don't understand how they got there. Silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Then Colton's voice came on. They must have had me on speaker. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Colton. What kind of things? What did the police find? Drugs, I said, letting the word shake. And money. They said it was drugs. But I don't know how, I would never. I dissolved into fake sobs that weren't entirely fake. Oh my God, Vivian said. Mother, this is serious. This is really serious. I know. I wailed. What do I do? What am I going to do? Colton jumped in, smooth as oil. Okay. Let's stay calm. First thing, did they arrest you? No. They asked questions and then let me go. But they took my purse. They took everything. Did they say they were pressing charges? They said they were investigating. That they'd be in touch. I paused for effect. Colton, I'm so scared. What if they think I did this? What if they arrest me? They won't, he said, too quickly. We won't let that happen. Listen, Mrs. Whitmore, Vivian and I are coming over. We need to talk about this. Figure out what to do next. Should I call a lawyer? No. Again, too quick. I mean, not yet. Let's not panic. Let's just talk first. See what our options are. Our options. Like he was part of this. Like he was trying to help instead of trying to destroy me. Okay, I said softly. Please come soon. I don't know what to do. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Stay put. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Not even Dorothy. Okay. We'll fix this, Mother, Vivian said. Her voice almost sounded genuine. Almost. We'll take care of everything. The call ended. I sat in Dorothy's kitchen, holding the phone, and realized I was shaking. But not from fear. From rage. Detective Harris called 2 minutes later. Perfect. We got it all. The concern, the instructions not to call a lawyer, the promise to fix everything. When they show up, we'll have officers nearby. Hidden. If they say anything incriminating in person, we'll have that too. What do I do when they get here? Act weak. Vulnerable. Everything you just did on the phone, but more. Let them think you're falling apart. Let them offer solutions. And whatever you do, if they suggest signing anything, call me immediately. They're going to try to get power of attorney, aren't they? Almost certainly. That's the end game. Get you declared incompetent, take control of your finances, and then he paused. And then what? And then you become a problem they need to solve permanently. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dorothy, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation, went pale. They wouldn't, she whispered. Not their own mother. But we both knew they would. People killed for a lot less than the fortune Arthur and I had built. When Vivian and Colton pulled up 30 minutes later, I was ready. I'd mussed my hair, put on yesterday's clothes, and made sure my eyes were red and swollen. Dorothy answered the door. She's in the living room. And she's very upset. They found me on the couch, tissues scattered around me, looking every bit the helpless old woman they thought I was. Vivian rushed over and hugged me. Mother, I'm so sorry this happened. It's going to be okay. We're here now. Colton sat down in the armchair across from me, already pulling out his phone. Mrs. Whitmore, tell us exactly what the police said. Every detail. So I did. I told them about the search, about finding the drugs and money, about the questions the police asked. I left out the part about the recording. About Marcus Chun. About Detective Harris believing me. I let them think I was alone and scared and desperate. Which is exactly what they wanted. Would you forgive family who betrayed you like this, or let justice speak? Let me know below. Colton leaned forward, hands clasped, face arranged in perfect concern. Mrs. Whitmore, I think we need to talk about your options here. Options. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue. Legally speaking, this situation is complicated. The police found drugs in your possession. Even if you didn't know they were there, proving that in court will be difficult. But I didn't know. I would never. I believe you, he said, smooth as butter. But the legal system doesn't care what we believe. They care about evidence. And right now, the evidence says you were carrying a significant amount of illegal narcotics. Vivian sat beside me, holding my hand. Her palm was sweaty. What Colton's saying is that you might need help managing this. Professional help. You mean a lawyer? More than that, Colton said. You're 74 years old. You're facing serious criminal charges. The stress alone could be dangerous for your health. You need someone to handle things for you. Make decisions. Take care of the legal complexities. There it was. The trap closing. What kind of someone? I asked, letting my voice quaver. Colton pulled a folder from his briefcase. Inside were papers. Legal documents. This is a power of attorney agreement. It would give Vivian and me the authority to act on your behalf. Handle your finances, make legal decisions, protect your interests. I don't understand. Think of it like this, Vivian said, squeezing my hand. You're overwhelmed right now. Scared. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone. Let us help you. We love you, Mother. We want to protect you. I looked at the papers. At the lines where my signature would go. At the trap laid out in legal language and false concern. I don't know, I whispered. This seems like a big decision. It is, Colton agreed. But it's necessary. The police could come back any time. They could arrest you. And if that happens, you'll need someone with legal authority to act immediately. To post bail, hire lawyers, access your accounts to pay for your defense. It was brilliant, really. They'd created a crisis and were now offering themselves as the solution. And if I was actually the frightened, confused old woman they thought I was, I'd probably sign. Can I think about it? I asked. Colton's expression flickered. Annoyance, quickly hidden. Of course. But I wouldn't wait too long. Every hour you delay is an hour the police could be building their case. Maybe just overnight? I could read through it, make sure I understand. Mother, Vivian said, her voice harder now, you don't have time for that. This needs to happen today. Now. Before things get worse. But Dorothy could help me review. Dorothy's not a lawyer. Colton snapped. Then softer, I'm sorry. I'm just worried about you, Mrs. Whitmore. We both are. We're trying to protect you. I let tears roll down my cheeks. I know you are. Everything's happening so fast. My phone rang. Detective Harris, right on time. Excuse me, I said. I should answer this. It might be the police. I stepped into Dorothy's kitchen. Put the phone on speaker so the hidden recording device could pick up both sides. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Detective Harris. I need you to come down to the station for additional questioning. When? I let my voice shake. This afternoon. 2 o'clock. And Mrs. Whitmore, bring a lawyer. This is moving beyond informal questioning. He hung up. I walked back into the living room, phone clutched in my hand, face pale. That was the detective. He wants me at the station this afternoon. He said, I swallowed hard. He said to bring a lawyer. Vivian and Colton exchanged glances. Mother, Vivian said, standing up, you need to sign these papers. Right now. Before you go to that station. If you're arrested, if they take you into custody, we won't be able to help you without legal authority. She's right, Colton added, pulling a pen from his jacket. This isn't optional anymore. This is necessary. I looked at the papers. At the pen. At their faces, arranged in masks of concern that didn't quite hide the hunger underneath. Okay, I whispered. Okay. Where do I sign? Colton's face lit up. Vivian actually smiled. He laid the papers on Dorothy's coffee table, pointing to the signature lines. Here, here, and here. And we'll need it notarized, but I know someone who can do that today. I picked up the pen. Let it hover over the first line. Then I set it down. Actually, I said, my voice suddenly steady, I don't think I will. The room went silent. What? Colton said. I stood up. Walked to the window. Outside, I could see the unmarked police cars parked on the street. Could see Detective Harris and 2 other officers getting out. I said I'm not signing. Mother, you don't understand the situation. Oh, I understand perfectly, Colton. I turned to face them. I understand that you planted drugs in my purse. I understand that you planned to have me arrested, declared incompetent, and locked away somewhere while you drained my accounts dry. Vivian went white. Colton stood up slowly. That's ridiculous, he said. You're obviously confused. Stressed. This is exactly why you need help. I also understand that you were recorded discussing the entire plan in the restaurant hallway. That the police have been investigating you for weeks. That every withdrawal, every phone call, every piece of your scheme has been documented. The color drained from Colton's face. Mother, Vivian started. Don't. The word came out sharp. Hard. Don't call me that. You lost the right when you decided my heartbeat had gone on too long. Her hand flew to her mouth. You didn't know I heard that, did you? The recording Marcus Chun made. The one where you agreed that I was just a bank account. Where you planned my destruction like it was a business meeting. The front door opened. Detective Harris walked in, followed by Officers Chen and Rodriguez. Colton Avery, Vivian Avery, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, possession with intent to distribute, and attempted elder abuse. Colton bolted. Made it 3 steps toward the back door before Officer Rodriguez tackled him. The sound of him hitting the floor was deeply satisfying. Vivian just stood there, frozen, as Officer Chen cuffed her hands behind her back. You can't do this, she whispered. I'm your daughter. I walked over to her. Looked her in the eyes. You were my daughter. Past tense. The moment you planted those drugs, you became something else. Something I don't have a word for. Mother, please. I gave you everything. My love. My money. My trust. And you tried to destroy me for it. I touched the pearls at my ears. These pearls? Your father saved for 6 months to buy them. He called me his girl even after 25 years. Do you know what that kind of love looks like? Of course you don't. Because you're incapable of it. Detective Harris stepped forward. Mrs. Avery, you have the right to remain silent. As he read them their rights, I watched my daughter's face crumble. Watched the reality of consequences finally hit her. She was crying now, real tears, probably the first real tears she'd cried in years. But I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just a deep, bone-tired exhaustion. They led Colton and Vivian out in handcuffs. Neighbors had gathered on the street, watching. Dorothy stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Did I? Yes. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure I'd ever be sure. The day they thought they'd inherit my fortune was the day I made sure they lost their freedom. The trial took 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording. The drugs traced back to Colton's dealer contacts. The financial records showing their mounting debts and desperate spending. Character witnesses who testified to their manipulation and greed. They each got 7 years. Federal prison. No parole for at least 5. I didn't attend the sentencing. Detective Harris called me with the verdict, and I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in my cottage, in Arthur's old armchair, and stared at nothing for a long time. Dorothy came over that evening with dinner. We ate in silence, and she didn't ask how I felt. She knew there were no words for it. The next week, I met with my lawyer. We'd been working on something, a way to turn this horror into something meaningful. I established a scholarship fund. $500,000 initially, with more to come. It would provide full rides to law school for young people working service jobs. People like Marcus Chun, who saw injustice and risked everything to stop it. Those who listen when no one else does, I told the lawyer, deserve to be heard. The Marcus Chun Justice Scholarship launched 3 months later. The first recipient was a young woman working as a home health aide who'd reported her client's son for financial abuse. She'd lost her job for it, but saved her client's life. At the ceremony, I wore Arthur's pearls. Marcus Chin gave a speech about courage and doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. I thought about Vivian and wondered if she was watching from wherever she was locked up. If she understood what she'd lost. If she cared. Probably not. Dorothy asked me once if I regretted it. Turning in my own daughter. Sending her to prison. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I regret that it was necessary, I finally said. I regret that she became someone capable of that kind of cruelty. But I don't regret stopping her. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. She nodded. And some justice is too important to ignore. That night, I sat in my cottage and thought about everything. About Arthur and the life we'd built. About the daughter we'd raised and lost somewhere along the way. About the waiter who'd risked his job to save a stranger. About choosing dignity over bitterness. Betrayal cuts deepest from those we love. But dignity, patience, and quiet justice triumph louder than anger. I still live in my cottage on Maple Street. Dorothy and I have dinner twice a week. The scholarship fund has helped 12 students so far, with more applications every semester. Sometimes I think about visiting Vivian. Writing her a letter. Trying one more time to find the daughter I lost. But then I remember her voice on that recording. That heartbeat's been going too long. And I know some things, once broken, can never be repaired. I'm 74 years old. I've lived long enough to know that life is both beautiful and cruel. That love can blind us. That family can betray us. That sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we should fear. But I've also lived long enough to know that we survive. We endure. We find new ways to matter. And as the gavel struck on that final day of sentencing, I realized something that should have made me sad but instead gave me peace. I hadn't lost a daughter. I had gained back my peace. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories of quiet justice. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Your thoughts might help someone else facing a similar betrayal. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next story. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the hardest moments, and sharing them helps us all heal. Thank you for being part of this family. Until next time, remember. Retry. Continue. Edit. That dignity and truth will always outlast deception and greed. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.